Let's call this Public Safety Committee to order. We're here, it's June 5th, 2019, and we'll have some introductions. We'll start with our newest presenter today.
Hello, I'm the new municipal prosecutor, Sarah Stanley, and I've been with the prosecutor's office about 5.5 years, and I'm excited to join you all.
Great.
Suzanne LaGrasse, Crystal Kennedy,
Pete Peterson.
Felix Rivera.
Nick Salato, Cynthia Davidson,
Dean Gates, Cynthia Thompson.
Justin Dahl, APD.
Jody Hetrick, AFD.
All right, well, fantastic. Let's go to some new business. And we've got, see if anyone from the Public Safety Advisory Commission has something they'd like to talk about, things that have been happening at some of our bus stops, occasional violence. Yes, sir.
I'm here, I'm the chair, Nick Danger.
Come on up, or speak loud enough so that they can hear you on the recording there.
Okay, so we put a resolution in with you guys here a month or two ago that we wanted to talk about, and what the public transit people came to us to talk about the problems we're having at the bus stops right now, and there's quite a few problems going on with them right now. So about 4 or 5 years ago, this was revisited, but they tried to make it more of a police problem than a bus problem, and that's not what the problem is. It's with the bus thing. So what we want to do with our resolution is try to have the assembly really define what we can do with the bus stops about trespassing, removing violent people, sleeping on the benches, and that's what we're trying to look for. That would open it up an opportunity for the public transit department to either hire security or somebody that could trespass these people off these bus stops and allow the bus stops to be safer. I had a person that came to our meeting. She's been beaten up twice at a bus stop already within the last 6 months. And she's scared to death to ride the bus now. She's gone there, they won't get off the benches, they're very aggressive. So that was our resolution, was put to you guys for that, to see what we could do about it. We don't have the power.
I see. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming to the committee. I have a question, and it might be to Chief Dahl. Do we have data by bus stop sites on crimes, arrests, reports, information, so we have a sense of the scale and where most of the crimes are occurring?
To the chair, to Ms. LaFrance, no. The way that we collect data doesn't necessarily include whether or not it happened at a bus stop, so it's not something that we could immediately filter for, which means we'd have to go through, we could start sort of geographically, but then we'd have to go through every single report to see by hand basically and read the narrative and see if it was somehow related to a bus stop or not. So it's not something that's necessarily impossible, but it would take a lot of staff time to try to produce something like that. I don't think that we have a sense from my talking with patrol shift commanders that there is sort of like this big upswing in crime at bus stops. But I do think, because typically they tend to have some sort of shelter associated with them, that what Mr. Danger is saying is probably true, is that sometimes people are hanging out there, and that can be a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Chief Dahl. I know that in other cities, sometimes the stops get relocated to more open areas, or there may be the opportunity to put up cameras, or well, we don't exactly have payphones anymore, but or do we?
Well, so no. I don't know. Actually, I can't think of the last time I saw a payphone.
Actually, there are two in Juneau, and they left them in the state capitol building just for all time's sake.
Huh, interesting. So I know in the past that AP has worked with transit in when we've had very specific problem bus stop locations, and I can think of one specifically in Fairview that were a constant problem, and we did move it, and I think that did help with the problem. So I mean, that's something that we have done in the past, kind of work collaboratively to say, okay, we know this one is an issue, and it was a whole combination of things in addition to sort of people who are actually using transit not wanting to use that stop because of the problems, but also surrounding property owners were having a lot of issues. And my recollection is that was pretty successful when we finally did that.
Well, and I see Jamie here from People Mover. And, do you have any information or ideas that you'd like to present at this point in time?
So we have a variety of challenges. I'm Jamie Acton, I'm the Director of Public Transportation. I have with me my operations superintendent and then also our planning manager who helps look at our ridership and what sort of amenities should be located at our bus stops and different facilities along with routes and things like that. So one of the things, we run into regularly is loitering at the stops. And we know very quickly who is actually a transit rider and who's hanging out, especially as we move to a higher frequency network. If a bus is coming every 15 minutes and you've been there through 3 cycles, you're not a transit rider at that point. So, we have a variety of challenges. Our ridership is very diverse and different needs. So, when we hear, oh, just remove the bench or, oh, just remove the shelter, it's like we have to really plan for a variety of uses and different types of people with different mobility abilities, and also just, what is the length of the duration at the stop? Is it a high frequency stop? Is it a stop that we have service every half hour, every hour? Just depends. So we have a variety of challenges to look at like that, but we also have some solutions that we are looking to employ. We have the opportunity to look at our stops and look at the amenities that are there based on the ridership. We have the availability to retrofit. We were talking about our benches at one point, like the whole idea of a long bench with no interruption in between it is very inviting for sleeping and hanging out. So there are some opportunities there as we look to refurbish our infrastructure and replace our inventory. We do that on a scheduled basis. And so if we look to take a bench out, do we replace it with a leaning pole? Do we replace it with a bench that has an interruption in it? So there's different opportunities there that we're looking at. We just worked with purchasing to look at how we could employ transit security on our buses, what that could potentially look like. This is something that for years and years and years it's been looked at. It usually comes down to a resource issue. We have a lot of grants. We have some grants that would be eligible for this type of activity. It's just what do we pull that's already being paid for by that grant to help pay for this activity? So we've got challenges, we've got solutions, and we are working with partners in the community. One of the things that we just went and presented was to a group of the Homeless Coalition and other health and human service providers. How can we get their outreach coordinators, their social outreach, their social workers, public health nurses? We're willing to offer free bus passes for these people to come on route and access the system to be able to do their outreach. And so hopefully targeting people that are either needing services, that are unaware of services, and just really kind of casting a wider net and putting people into touch with, the services that are needed, but also diversifying our ridership. That's a big thing for us. How do we get a little bit of everybody on the bus and make sure that our riders are safe, our drivers are safe, and that this is just a vibrant community where people are walking and biking and taking transit and feel safe out on the streets. So we really are talking about this holistically and as a community issue rather than just a transit issue. Transit riders, bicyclists, pedestrians, they are at higher risk. We know this. They're out on the street more. They're more vulnerable in that sense because they're out using these facilities in our services. So, but rather than target them, we would like to blanket this community and really be part of the solution as to how we can impact the change that we're looking to see out on our streets.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Southhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you put the resolution together, did you identify any specific bus stops that seem to be more problematic than others?
No, they didn't pick them out. It was just a kind of a generalization for the awareness for you as the assembly to look at this again, and again, not as a police issue, as a public safety issue. And they've got some great ideas what to do with bus monitors. They could send out a little security force that could go clean out the bus stops. But what we needed from you was to make sure that we could do it within the law and be able to move these transients out of this bus stop so it's safe for the riders to get into them. That's what we were looking for the assembly to help the people movers with, because we weren't sure what the law was as far as them enforcing that. And we don't want to call the police every 5 minutes to have 5 people thrown off a bus stop bench. They have way more stuff to do than that. So that's why we brought this up. And again, like I said, it was brought to you 4 years ago. They went right at the police with it, and that was the wrong way to go. The people mover have some fantastic ideas what to do. So they just need to back up the assembly to make sure that we all get on the same page and these people are safe on the buses, including the drivers too. And I just heard a little while ago that they had an issue at the bus stop down here last night with a driver. Somebody assaulted a driver. So
Really?
it's out there.
Well, in the good old days, buses that I had taken in Latin America, they had a guy that was served as a protector / collector at the front door when you pay your bus fare.
Correct.
And he was also on the bus to make sure nobody got out of line.
Correct.
But obviously, we don't need that nowadays with people, buying most of their bus passes online and that type of thing.
Yeah. The monitor is a big thing, and they still do it in some of the larger cities down in the United States. They're still doing bus monitors to help to support the bus driver and then be the authority on the bus while the bus is moving.
So,
Ms. Ackman, do you have a strategy, or are you considering how to engage the various community councils about the bus stops in their areas as you look for, community-based solutions in some of your work?
So at this point, we have not engaged the community councils directly that I'm aware of. We are right now in the middle of a short-range planning process, and we're out in the community attending a ton of meetings. It's primarily focused on additional service now that we've implemented the new system, and it's interesting to see one of the ideas that the community is pushing forward as we're traveling throughout is this idea of transit security. And so rather than an additional level of service, they're asking, no, we want actual security rather than increased frequency or more routes or more coverage. So not directly to the community councils yet, but we have been traveling throughout the city at this point.
Okay, I guess I would just encourage, when most of the community councils come back in session in the fall, they know their neighborhoods best. If there are bus stops that are, raising, because there isn't a great way to track them, then it might be a good way to get data as you look to maybe make structural changes or changes to the bus stops, because they'll also probably be aware of maybe the ridership coming from those bus stops. Just they see, this particular bus stop always has someone with a wheelchair or someone who's older or something like that. So.
One of the things Mr. Danger mentioned was having a small crew be able to go and basically clear out the bus stops. Do you want to speak to site management real quick?
We do have a 3-member site enhancement crew that currently does that task now. They go around cleaning up the bus stops on a fixed routine around Anchorage. So we already kind of do that. The enforcement side, they're not doing that, but just their presence there kind of pushes people away from that, seeing that are not riders.
Sir, could you identify yourself for the tape?
My name is Wes Renfrew. I'm the operations superintendent for public transit.
Okay, great. And for the record, Mr. Constant has joined us. Any other questions or comments about the bus stop? Oh, that's right.
I think you were first. She was first.
Right, Ms. LaFront. And
Thank
then
you,
Ms.
Mr.
Kennedy.
Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. So a question for Ms. Acton, and I'm not surprised that you already have some solutions identified. Do you have a plan listing those solutions in order of priority and the amount of resources available? And are there any other barriers besides resources to implementing the solutions that you would like to address these issues?
We don't have anything formally at this point, but I would like to get something like that in place. It would be super helpful to have that as we apply for different grant opportunities or as we need to, pitch to the administration and things like that. So I think right now we're really primed to get something like that going. One of the things I wanted to tack on with Wes real quick when he mentioned the site enhancement crew, and kind of similar to the community councils that you're bringing up, is that we do have the Adopt a Stop program that we are resurrecting, and I think you might have heard a little bit about it when you were working on the climate action plan. One of the people that testified was talking about the ability to adopt a stop, and so basically what that is businesses or individuals in the community taking ownership of a stop and either emptying the trash or doing beautification, things like that, and we provide the bags and gloves and the pickup of the trash and things like that. So we're really trying to tie that at the grassroots level as well. So that would be a strategy that would be listed in one of those plans that you're talking about. So that we're already doing. So we'll get something like that drafted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last night we had during just a open public testimony time, one of the bus drivers who came in and talked about public intoxication. And my question to her was, well, as a bus driver, do you have the ability to basically refuse to allow a rider on the bus? And of course it went into a much bigger conversation, so that wasn't really my focus on that one. But I guess what I would like to know, or I wonder, is are you looking at also trying to come up with policies and procedures for how to deal with some of these situations where a bus driver maybe doesn't feel comfortable with having a certain rider on there, and what they do about that? And certainly there's a lot of judgment in that kind of situation where you maybe have to decide that I need to call 911 because of this person at the stop, or this passenger's in danger because of something that's going on at the stop. Anyway, I could just see where there's just a lot of different scenarios that could be occurring that probably bus drivers, or bus drivers specifically because they see it, would have to have some guidance on in terms of how to really appropriately respond. So are you working on those kinds of policies?
We absolutely have those policies in place,
Okay.
and I'll let Wes
So,
speak
yeah,
to
this is Wes
directly.
again. So we just finished up a safety meeting this month with them. The person that spoke out to the public last night was the driver that was actually helping us put that organization of that together. So we had a stance of no fare, no ride for a long time there, and we were allowing the drivers to refuse that transportation when they meet the passenger. What we were finding is that's when the confrontation began. That was when they were most exposed and most potential for harm towards the driver. So we've taken that out of their hands. We have a code that they call into dispatch now, where they are the 10 code, we call it. We'll go back to the driver to say, let them ride. We alerted the authorities. We either take them back down to downtown transit where there is a security presence there, or we get APD involved and have them come out to the bus en route or wherever we're going to meet them. So we're trying to take the driver out of the mix and put it on the dispatch and then the support services that are out there to get to that, to help.
Okay, so can I follow up on that? Just in terms of, I also think, well, I appreciated her comment, kind of the compassionate part of all of this too.
Yeah.
And, and of course she said, well, at least we keep some of these intoxicated people from driving, which that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and maybe this is more of a question for Chief Dahl, but the liability issue in that, where you're kind of taking on a little bit of almost a police type of a role. Are there issues with that? Are those things we need to address? Are they not an issue? Or I don't care who comments on that, but.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that we do have a bus rider code of conduct that's outlined in code. And so our operators, to the extent that it doesn't take them away from doing the driving and the safe maneuvering that's required for them to do their job, that's kind of also one of those other duties as assigned type issue. We encourage our operators, we basically require our operators, if there's anything that they're not comfortable with, they need to be contacting dispatch for the support, for the clarification, for anything like that they need to be able to help support the policies that are in place to keep the vehicle and themselves and the riders safe. So I think that code of conduct is one of our first tools that we have. How do we enforce that? That can be anything from removing somebody from a vehicle. It could be banning people from vehicles. In the incident of last night, that person received a year ban from the system. It was that egregious, and we've had multiple problems, and so that person's no longer eligible to ride the system for a year, and we'll have to go through a reinstatement period where basically, we'll go through a process with that individual to see if they're ready to be reinstated or not. So There's a lot that leads up to ending up in that situation, but I don't know that any of it goes beyond or oversteps kind of the legality issues or the liability issues that you may think.
Well,
I
and
think-
we're hiring drivers, we're not hiring bouncers.
Right.
So it would be an expanded role, and I think it would make it a little more difficult to recruit them if we expected them to bounce people out there. Chief Dahl?
I think that, to Ms. Kennedy's question, the liability doesn't change too much whether it's somebody that works for transit taking some of these actions versus somebody that works for the police department, other than sort of associated with whoever that person's training and experience is. But if you think about what Mr. Danger is suggesting and what Ms. Acton talked about as far as having maybe monitors or security on the bus, there's always a balance when you have sort of private security or non-law enforcement security between the action they take and actual law enforcement action. And that's something that if they decided to do, we'd probably work with them on to make sure they understood what we thought the line was and try to keep their personnel from crossing over, just because the nature of a security type person is that they're occasionally going to have sort of a confrontation. Hey, you're not following the rules, we need you to. But generally, we try to steer them in the direction of, look, let people know what the rules are, try to get them to follow them, but don't engage in like physical confrontation. If it's escalated to that point, call the police, patrol show up, and that's, literally what we spend a lot of time and money training them to deal with. So,
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. The people mover staff seem now to function like bouncers, but they are also behavioral health technicians. At the entry level of the behavioral health field, they work as the front line for the municipality in that arena, as do members of the police department, fire department, library, etc. Which I have now 2 years been advocating that we hire a behavioral health director at the municipality, and hopefully we get there. But one thing that we did, Ms. Zalatel and myself last night, is reached out to Michael Chadwick, who is our auditor, and we've asked him to begin a very daunting process that would, in a general sort of way, not in a traditional audit sort of way, which would be every piece of paper and everything, but help us to determine our expenditures across the departments relating to homelessness, behavioral health, and substance abuse issues. Because there's no way for us at this time to quantify what we're actually spending on these issues. And so I anticipate sometime in the not too distant future, you will all be hearing from Michael about establishing a framework, about how we can capture that information as best as we can. So I just wanted to let you all know, since you're here, that that conversation has begun, and we're hoping to kind of move through that through the summer, and maybe by the fall have a better sense of our actuals relative to the expenses that everybody's accruing on healthcare issues that are outside of the scope of your work, but because of the reality, they are your work. So,
Was there a question in there?
no, that was letting them know that this is coming, and I don't want them to tell me off the top how to do that. I prefer them to figure out how to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll have a conversation about that in the near term.
All right. Fantastic. All right, any other comments, ideas about the occasional violence at the bus stops? All right, well, thank you very much, and yeah, get back to us when you've got a plan or anything. Suzanne?
Sorry, Mr.
No
Chair.
problem, Ms. Flanagan.
I was wondering if it'd be okay to check in with Mr. Danger, if you are good with this conversation and feel like we've responded adequately and are comfortable with the plan forward.
Yeah, through the chair, that's absolutely what we're looking for, just to get it started, getting the ball rolling. And they're on the same page, and I think that's wonderful. So we're all looking at it's the same way again. And they can internally fix it. It doesn't have to be a police problem, and we can get this back so everybody's safe riding the bus again. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Okay, let's go to our next item of business, proposed HB 49 repeal and replacement of SB 91 and the changes that the legislature has made.
Is there anyone over here?
I gave Bill mine.
Okay. First, a couple of caveats. This is my first stab at doing a sort of highlight presentation. We probably will end up doing this with APD and other groups that are interested. This was specifically what subjectively I personally thought that the Assembly might be interested in. So specifically things that have to do with misdemeanor crimes, bail, probation, re-release back into the community. So I don't address in here some of the felony changes. There's other people who can probably answer that better than I could. But these are the things that I thought were of interest to this group and to my office as we prosecute misdemeanors. Section 15 is actually not necessarily relevant to my office, but it's maybe interesting to the public. Section 15 makes it, is the incident with Judge Corey, basically makes it illegal to masturbate in front of an adult. So that's that one. 16 to 29, and these are the sections of the HB 49. I decided it was easier to do it that way than to refer to the state statute.
Can I ask a-
Yeah.
Ms. Quinn Davids?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of don't even want to ask this question, but why in front of an adult and not just, I mean.
It was already a crime to masturbate in front of someone under 16.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
Mr. Constant?
I think though what she means is.
well, what
in
I
front
meant
of-
is what I said, and she
then-
answered it.
But I think what she means
Oh.
is in front of an adult that is unwilling, not just generally.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I just meant why was it not a child?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking.
Because they're, yeah.
Yeah. And throughout this, I tried to translate the legalese into plain language. Please, if you have any questions about that, just ask me. Section 16 to 29 is a whole section on property crimes. Several sections are about removing language about adjusting for inflation. It makes it illegal to use identification documents as well as access devices. This one might be of interest to Anchorage. It makes it a crime to possess motor vehicle theft tools. It makes that an A misdemeanor. So that's the legislature trying to be responsive to vehicle thefts. Yeah.
Question?
Ms. LaFranc?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what exactly are those tools?
I can find it for you. 16, just I have it right here. Oh, you got it right there? Thank you. A Slim Jim, a master key, altered or shaved key, trial or jiggler key, lock puller, electronic unlocking device, or similar device.
Okay.
I don't know what all of those are personally. That's it. Yeah.
I don't have any of those tools, but I've seen some of them
Right.
used on TV.
Yeah.
Mr. Constant?
A lot of stuff could be.
Does that allow certain groups to possess those under that law, or is it just blanket? There's nobody can have them?
What section was that, Bill?
26.
Thank
page
you.
14.
I just had to find it. 26, page 14. With intent to use or permit to use the tool in the commission of the theft. So we still have to prove intent. So just having it in your house is fine.
No, I mean, I have a scenario that's
Okay.
rather funny. At my professional office, APD showed up and one of them locked their keys in their car. And it took the administrative manager of the company I work for with a Slim Jim to get the door.
Okay.
I don't want him to be a criminal.
Right.
So,
Yep.
Ms. Kennedy?
Well, I'd say my same question. My son-in-law is a former locksmith. He's got all those
Right, right.
tools, and he has absolutely saved people and locked their keys in the car in the parking lot. So we want to make sure that just because he has
Yeah,
them-
no, there is an intent to commit a
Okay.
crime element, and presumably prosecutors would not accept a case, where
True,
that
where
intent
they
is
were
not there.
helping
Yeah.
a citizen, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Chief McCoy?
Yes, Ms. Stanley's point, intent is required, and there's a similar statute for being in possession of burglary tools, and that intent is a requirement, so it would be the same with theft, vehicle theft tools.
Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Continue.
There's a new section, which I need to read more carefully myself, but value of items stolen from one establishment can be aggregated over a 6-month period in one case. I don't know if this will be practically actually helpful. So say someone goes to Cars and steals, $10 worth of food many times over a 6-month period, because there's still issues about whether you can actually make all those incidents one case. So I would need to research that further and see if that would actually be helpful to get the dollar amount up, so it would be a higher charge.
And so
Yeah.
it would depend, 6-month period, so, it might be hard to keep track of all that. Chief Donald?
I think where you're seeing that coming from, in our experience, has been with some of the larger stores, like larger box stores or Walmart, places like that, where they know they have people that have, and they have the evidence to show that they've been in multiple times. They just haven't been caught by loss prevention, and they're typically stealing like $499 at a time, just under the felony level, but they do it 10 times in a row. And this is probably as a result of some of the frustration with dealing with those cases, would be my guess.
And if they're back to back, it's easier to combine them into one case, but if one's in January, one's in May, it's harder.
So has there been test cases in courts about that? Is it legal for us to add up the losses over a 6-month period of time? Do we
I've
know
never
that?
heard of anyone trying it in my limited time here in Anchorage.
That could become interesting at some point then.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sections 34 to 38 are very relevant to my office. Escape. So it is now going to be a crime to cut off your ankle monitor. So when you are on pretrial release for, under PED supervision, it will now be a crime to tamper with your ankle monitor. It will also be a crime to leave your house if you're on house arrest. Currently, that's not a crime. It's violating a condition of release, but it's not its own crime. It also, this is exciting to us, failing to appear in court is now going to be a crime again. SB 91 made it just a violation, like a traffic ticket. So, and then violating conditions of release, actually that is a crime now. I need to restate that. But the limit, it won't be limited to 5 days anymore as a penalty for violating your bail conditions.
So before, if they violated their bail conditions, they got 5 days for doing that?
That's a maximum.
Oh, that was a maximum?
Yeah. Before SB 91, it was, I forgot which kind of misdemeanor, but it wasn't capped at 5 days. So SB 91 at first made it just a ticket. So you're out on bail, you contact the victim that you just, beat up the night before, and you got a ticket for that. Then 54, we had another, set of laws in between, brought it up to 5 days. Now we're over 5 days.
Well, I thought if you violated your conditions of release, you got to go back and finish your commuted part of your sentence or something.
Oh, no, this is conditions before trial, before you're
Oh,
convicted.
before
Yeah,
trial.
these are bail conditions before trial.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank
yeah,
you.
please feel free to ask if I'm not clear about something.
Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, so makes it a crime to fail to appear. Is that based on circumstance, or is that if you just don't appear?
I'd have to read our code to look up the exact language, but failing to appear for your court date.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but
What's the
is there a
intent?
defense of based on circumstance? Like in response, can someone say, whatever?
Right, that's a good
I
question.
was in the hospital.
I was in the hospital.
Right,
or
no, I understand what you're saying.
I have a mental illness, and
Right. No, I understand your question. I have to find the exact subsection.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have a helper in the audience. So the person commits the crime if they fail to appear, and the person knows that the person is required to appear at a certain time and place, and they're criminally negligent in not appearing before the court. Yep.
thank you.
The reality on the ground is that we're not going to charge people, if there's a good reason. A lot of people don't show up to court quite a lot, and a very small fraction are failure to appear charges. Let's see. Disorderly conduct. SB 91 brought that down to 1 day maximum jail time. Now it went up a little to 3 days on the first, 10 on the second. Sections 41 to 47 created some new, I called it pornography, they don't call it that, but pornography crimes. Those will be prosecuted, some of them by the state basically, but sending electronic pornography to and representing adults, so adults in the pictures, making it a crime to produce the photos, which was interesting, and making it a crime to solicit indecent photos of a minor. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and tell you about some sections that I didn't write about at all. Right at the beginning of HB 49, there's some sections about murder and various sex assault crimes. Those are all dealt with by the state, so I skipped over for now. Going on, 48 to 55. They reclassified drug offenses. The ones that we prosecute here at the city, which are mixed 5 and 6 is what we call them, those remain basically unchanged. They just changed the number of it. Like they renamed it from 4 to 5 and 5 to 6. Bail. Oh, yeah.
And so, on drug offenses, are we talking about possession of heroin or something?
That would be a mixed 5. If you have a small amount of heroin, that's a mixed 5. So that's in our code. Our city code adopts those two state statutes, the mixed 5 and 6. So whenever they change, ours changes, unless we do something different to stop following them.
All right, and so if an individual is caught doing that for the first time, do they get a chance to not go to jail by getting some treatment, or what are their options?
You know, the reality in our office is that generally we only get these charges. They're pretty rare. We only get them usually when they're with another crime. So someone's arrested for something else, and then the police find drugs on them. And the reality on the ground is that we generally, if we're offering a deal, which we do, and we offer deals in every case, we would ask that they plead guilty on the other count, and we end up dismissing, the possession charge. So I can't say that happens 100% of the time, but that's really what happens. Where was I? Bail. There's some good news on bail. What we struggle with a lot in our office is just people being released. People continue to offend. They rack up, 7 violating conditions of release while they're waiting for trial. We have cases where they have contacted their victim, like 70 times between being arraigned and trial. So enforcing bail conditions is really important to our office. First of all, the SB 91 said that if someone can't make bail, judges have to revise bail to a point where they can be released, which I completely understand the justice aspects of that. But what 49 does, it says they can't consider inability to pay bail as a factor unless the defendant shows good faith effort to pay. So what often happens in bail hearings is a defendant will say, they'll ask for a bail hearing to lower the bail, which is keeping them performing, whatever they're supposed to be doing. And their argument is just, I can't pay for it, and there's no further inquiry. So this allows the judge to try to get them to describe what efforts they took to pay the bail before lowering it. Any questions on that?
So if someone has got a job, and if they end up not being able to make bail, they'll lose that job, but they don't have enough cash on hand to bail out immediately, they could set up so much out of each paycheck deal to the judge or something.
Well, it would have to all be paid up front, because I don't think they'll do bail that way.
All right.
But the point is,
you could go to a bail bondsman and maybe work out a deal like that. Or
depending if that's the kind of bail that was set. So basically, it allows the judges to take into account inability to pay, which they could always do, but now they have to at least, make some showing that they made an effort to try to pay.
Okay.
And I fully realize that some people really can't pay, but there was no inquiry after someone would make that claim. This is, so SB 91 put in place, I don't know if you remember, a pre-assessment tool. It was basically an algorithm that pretrial enforcement division would do that would produce a score for new offenders. And if someone got certain scores, then it was presumptive OR release. This bill gets rid of presumptive OR release. So the judge can still do it, just as they always could. I mean, it used to be judges had discretion, and they used their discretion in every case. SB 91 took away that discretion from the judges and just said, you have to just follow the score of this that was on the printout. Okay, I'm oversimplifying, there's exceptions to everything, but so this gets rid of presumptive release, though the reality is now the judges, have been sort of operating in this new sort of scale for a few years now, and many of them will probably, continue to really take into seriously the possibility of doing a OR release.
Mr. Coase?
Yeah, thank you. Did they in the previous bill or this bill or in some other method figure out how to incorporate out-of-state offenses in their calculation of pretrial release?
You know what? I'm going to write that down, and can I email you?
Please.
Okay. Chris Constant. I did see mention of it. I know right now, out-of-state crimes are not taken into account. So, but I did see some mention of that somewhere in the probation part. So let me find that.
It might be something that's extraordinary to the law. It could be federal rules or something. I'm not sure.
Right.
Thank you.
So I'll find that out in email. Out of state, right? Out of state. Let's see. Oh, another thing that has come back is SB 91 got rid of third-party custodians as an option for release. Anyone need me to say what a third-party custodian is? You're good.
So that doesn't exist at all anymore then?
No, right now there's no third-party custodians anywhere where there's PED, Pretrial Enforcement Division.
Oh.
So in Anchorage, there's no third-party custodians, and there haven't been since SB 91. So this brings that back as a possibility in Anchorage.
Oh, so this actually brings it back, okay, all right.
Yep, as an option. Also, SB 91, so to be someone's third-party custodian, you have to be approved by the court. And the standard under SB 91 was that you just had to be felony-free for 3 years. This raises that to 5. So the people supervising, the baileys are now farther away from their own felony conviction. Sentencing. It limits jail. You can get, currently, you can get credit for time you spent on electronic monitoring under bail conditions of release, or time you spent in treatment, and you can use that credit towards your sentence, your jail sentence. This bill limits that credit that you can use towards your sentence to 365 days. Probation limits have gone up. We're now back up to 10 years we can do up to 10 years now again for misdemeanors. Go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Chair. Can you tell me a little bit about the mechanics of how probation works for misdemeanors at
Yes.
the municipal level?
Yes. So this is informal probation. So what it means is, if say you're on probation for 3 years, it means for 3 years you have to not commit any new offenses. You have to comply with whatever conditions are set in your case. For example, doing your anger management treatment or doing your ASAP alcohol treatment. As you don't report to anyone, so there's no one overseeing you. So as long as you stay out of trouble and do whatever's required, then that's it. That's all you have to do.
Is that equal or the same in our treatment on our wellness courts?
Yes.
For our municipal misdemeanors, so if someone's diverted into wellness court for those, there's still no follow-up or no oversight? Other than checking back in with the court?
Well, when you're in the program, there's a ton of oversight because but that's all sentencing or dismissal. We're talking now about after that. So that whether you're convicted in wellness court or in regular court, probation works the same way. So yes, there would not be follow-up. You would just have to stay out of trouble and do whatever is required, like alcohol treatment or anger management. But you wouldn't be reporting into someone on a regular basis, like in a felony case. Yep. Where are we? In SB 91, there was a lot of requirements, and this is getting into felony world, which is really complex, and I don't want to get too deep into it. But basically, it required probation officers. Now we're talking about felonies. It required them to make recommendations to terminate probation after certain amounts of time had passed. So it required them to go to the court and say this person should be released just purely based on the number of years they were in on time passing. This gets rid of that. So again, we're back to more human discretion. We have a new aggravator in several crimes of exposing children to meth, which is can only be a good thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Chair. May I ask a question?
Right. Ms. LaFrance.
I'm sorry. Why just meth, do you know? Other drugs?
Well, I think my guess, I'm not the legislature, but my guess is meth can stay in the walls. I mean, it can actually permeate a structure. And so it causes more of a harm. And probably the police can talk about this and whatever measures they take, I don't know, when they enter a house that is dangerous. But, yeah. So if heroin is on a table somewhere, that won't hurt someone that doesn't come in contact with it directly. But meth can be in a whole building and in other objects.
And is that just if they happen to be manufacturing the meth, or if they're just using it?
Let me double
It's
check.
in the walls too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. So.
I think if it's smoked in there or if it's manufactured, but this is again not my expert. Mr. Falsey, are you still looking up things for me? Is he? I didn't know he was going to do this. He's just been very helpful. No wonder he's so productive.
Yeah.
Mr. Lieutenant Carson, or is it Sergeant, or?
Lieutenant Carson.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there's, drugs are used in different methods. Traditionally heroin's injected. Obviously, it's not going to be in the air that much. You can smoke heroin, but the way you smoke it is through a straw, so it's got really little vapor in the air. But with meth, it can, on heavy use residences, just by smoking, it can get in the walls and exposed. I know with crimes against children, the kids, you don't see a lot of kids coming in testing positive for heroin and things like that. You see it a lot more common with the meth coming because of the exposure in the air and the secondhand smoke and things like that. So it tends to be the one that a lot of times that the kids will pop for, unless there's direct administration by a parent, which on extremely rare cases does happen, but that's extremely rare. So, but yes, smoking it without the labs, it can get into the walls. It can permanently kind of permeate into the walls. It is rare, hard to test for, but there is, I know that there is private businesses around that do go around testing for that.
And it looks like it is manufacturing. Sorry. So if you're manufacturing, that's an aggravator.
Okay. Ms. Quinn Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because this is so fascinating to me. So are the children, when you say they're testing positive, does that mean they're feeling high, or just that it might be impacting their bodies negatively, or what exactly is going on with the kids who are testing positive?
That's out of my wheelhouse. Honestly, I'm not an expert on it. I know that to what level they're testing, are they feeling high or not? I'm not an expert on the kids, nor am I a doctor. The chief may know.
I don't know specifically the answer to that. I suspect probably as part of their Alaska Care screening, they're getting some medical screening it's coming up in their blood work. But I think with this particular aggravator, it sounds like it's manufacturing, and that's kind of what the discussion started around. And if you think about that, a meth lab obviously is a giant chemical reaction that's extremely hazardous to everybody in the vicinity, and it sounds like that's what this is targeting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, I think they had a special trailer on Breaking Bad where they made all this stuff, right? That's the only information I've got about that.
And I'd like to put meth labs in Alaska, especially Anchorage, are extremely, extremely rare. It's just not traditionally manufactured here anymore. It's being imported. So I know a lot of people, we get a lot of calls about labs, and they actually turn out to be true not very often. There's hash labs and things like that. A lot of times are mistaken, but meth labs, because it's so cheap, there's so much being imported that the actual manufacturing is so hard with the federal regulations on Sudafed and blocking the precursors to it that we don't see it like we used to in the 90s and early 2000s.
So it's mostly imported from Mexico at this point.
Source cities or source countries.
All right, great. Okay. Wait a minute, Mr. Costa.
Sorry.
Just as a personal note, I served on a grand jury, and there was an active meth lab in a homeless camp on the property that's now the Natural Pantry. and it was extraordinarily well organized. And so it's pretty surprising where those things crop up. I have a question regarding the discussion about the change in the sentencing requirements. Your previous topic, you talk a lot about the return of human discretion, which I really appreciate. Did you find anywhere in the rules where they establish new mandatory minimums?
No, I think it mostly peeled back or released the maximums.
Given the human, I appreciate human discretion. I'm very much opposed to the mandates as opposed to allowing.
Now again, I may have missed something. This is all my disclaimer, but yeah, most of the changes were allowing judges more discretion to make decisions, and maximums were increased.
Well, the thing about increasing mandatory minimums is, if our prison gets full, where are they going to build the next one, and where are they going to get the money to build it? Looking at it from a point as a former state legislator, I was in the legislature a decade, and they were just building a new prison out there. And part of the reason that SB 91 passed in the first place was because the projections were that they were going to build another one, and where was the funding for that going to come from, and who was going to let them build it in their neighborhood? So there's always seems to be questions that have to be answered in advance.
When you're done.
Go ahead.
I would like to note that for our misdemeanors, the cap, well, I'm about to talk about this. SB 91 brought a cap for A misdemeanors down to 30 days for first offense for most kinds of cases. There's some exceptions. This brings it back up to a year for a misdemeanor. The reality is it's pretty rare to do a year. We generally operate down in the 0 to 40 day range for most misdemeanors. The only ones where we really, it's usually assaultive type behavior with a really bad history where sentences start to get, higher. So we're not itching to put every person in jail for a year.
Yeah, I just prefer you to have flexibility.
Right, absolutely.
Mandated either way.
Right, yeah. B misdemeanors have gone back up to 90 days from 10 days. I would like to note, actually, our city code is 6 months is a B misdemeanor. However, SB 91, when it was passed, said that where a municipality has a law that's similar to a state law, we are going to be capped by the state's caps. So we still have actually a 6-month B misdemeanor law on the books, but the reality, and we never changed it, the reality is, though, at sentencing, the courts won't give more than the state. So it'll be 90 days. Driving, I'm almost done. I hope you're not getting bored. Okay. The driving, so it used to be that it was a crime, a misdemeanor, to drive with a license that was revoked, canceled, or suspended. And there were various ways you could commit that crime. One way is if you were driving after it was revoked for a DUI. And then a few years ago, that remained a crime, but all the other reasons that you could have a license suspended if you were driving in violation of one of those all became violations, so tickets, basically. This makes it a crime to drive with a suspended license for one of those non-DUI reasons if you've done it more than once. So that makes it a crime again. Whether we'd want to change our code to mirror that, that's up to us. We'll have to figure that out. Those were the highlights I had. Are there any questions? Or?
Actually, could you repeat that last part about the driving?
Sorry, it's really confusing. So there's
the conflict between codes.
Oh, well,
or just the whole.
Our code right now says it's a crime to drive with a suspended license for a DUI, but it's only a ticket to drive with a suspended license for any other reason. Okay. So this brand new recidivist thing, where if you've done it before, it's now a misdemeanor. Obviously, that's not in our code yet. It's not in the state code yet either, until whenever July 1st. Yeah.
So if someone, say, had gotten a half a dozen speeding tickets and lost their license,
exactly.
Then they got caught driving, So they could, so that would be a misdemeanor.
Well, it would be a ticket, but then if they do it a bunch of times, it would be a misdemeanor.
Okay.
I don't know if it's 2 or 3 yet.
All right. Ms. Friends.
May I follow up with that? And this may be a joint question to you and Chief Dahl. You know, one of the criticisms of SB 91 was there was not a whole lot of training when it was rolled out. How is the Muni handling that, or APD, as far as informing officers and training on like this last item that you mentioned, for example? How will that be handled?
Thank you, sir. So at APD, the way it'll be handled is we'll partner with both the municipal prosecutor's office, but also the district attorney's office, and sort of figure out what changes are going to affect the people, mostly patrol, but also really all the officers on their day-to-day activities, and then we'll just do informational briefings. Typically for patrol, it's done at the daily briefing. If you've done right along, you know how that works. But also briefings for detectives if there are changes that at the felony level that affect the way they do cases. But we'll basically partner with the prosecutors and then figure out what those differences are and roll them out.
And
If you have a comment on that, go ahead.
oh no, I had closing comments.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Mr. Costa.
Yeah, so since you brought up partnerships with the AG and prosecutors and whatnot, now might be a good time for a discussion briefly about our relationship with them, with our shared prosecutor and the kind of detective MOU. How's that going? What's happening?
Oh, you mean our prosecutor who's over at the state? She's over there right now. Honestly, we have some, we're low on attorneys currently. But she's over there right now. I'm actually excited for her to come back. It's only a year, it's a year position for one person anyway.
Right.
I kind of wish I had her back right now.
What's the timeline on that? Can we, when you're done, give us a report on kind of how it went?
And how it went? Yeah, sure.
I mean, thoughts for the future?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you mean in September? Check back in?
When
or?
it's done, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you say you're a little shorthanded. Are you shorthanded because we're sharing that of one of our?
Oh,
that
no,
office,
not
or
because of her.
We have retirements or vacations?
Just people move on, yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Ms. Alton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This kind of goes to the whole, I've represented clients in the past who were really disappointed when SB 91 came about. I primarily represent indigent and people with mental illness, and they would go and commit a small crime so that they could get a bed for the night, a warm place to stay. So they will be really happy to hear about the rollback of SB 91. They were very frustrated when they didn't have anywhere to go. But I did learn about a program today, HALO, that's a cooperation with Partners for Reentry, which I wanted just to kind of share a little bit of information about, because it kind of goes back to that initial intent of SB 91, where if someone's picked up, they maybe committed a misdemeanor, but they have a mental illness, they can go and get a bed for the night instead of going to the jail. And that's a really fantastic bit of diversion, and I think it's going to be really great, because I've heard some kind of frustration around those who keep committing infractions and are deemed incompetent, not restorable. So hopefully that will take a little bit of pressure off your office, but also create some diversion and get that bed, that so
That
many
would be
people are
wonderful.
wanting, and kind of sometimes being the impetus for an infraction or a misdemeanor being committed.
And so then they go to API instead of?
No, the Partners for Reentry, so some of them go into like the Henry House and some other scattered site places that have some help for them. So yeah, I just learned about that. So that's great. It's new, it's being piloted, but I know that it will catch those folks that I've had prior experience with that would, steal something for purposes of getting a warm bed, especially in the winter.
Well, maybe that's something that this committee needs to keep track of to see what kind of successes.
I'll pass some information out to you, Chair.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you. Unless we have any questions, you go ahead and do a conclusion if you'd like.
Question?
Or Mr. Gates.
Thanks, Mr. Shadow. Thank you, Mrs. Stanley, for your summary of HB 49. I should go look at the bill, but now basically summarize some of the legal changes to criminal law that for how they may be affected on municipal code. And SB 91, for your information, basically, SB 91 added a new section to Title 29 that affected only municipalities, though we couldn't have a punishment for offense where there's comparable state offense greater than the state's punishment. So we had to, after SB 91 passed, there was a prosecutor at the time on the ordinance for changing for the crimes in our code to reduce our penalties to match the states, where they had reduced to those who were violating conditions of release and failure to appear. And so now with this bill, going back up to the misdemeanor level, we had previously amended our code to reduce them to $1,000 fine, which SB 91 had done. So the interesting thing is now that this HB 49 increases the state penalty to misdemeanor, this statute that preempts us from having greater penalties doesn't require us to have the same penalty. You can have a lesser penalty. So can we leave these at $1,000 fines, minor offense in our code for those two offenses, or we could come back and raise them to match, which HB 49 has done. Is that correct?
Yes, and so what I'm foreseeing, though, this all needs to go through the right channels, is maybe after the passage, sometime in the next month, do just a couple really brief code changes, like to make failure to appear a crime again, for example, and then later in the fall to do a more, to look at all of our criminal code and maybe do some more substantive changes, but we could do quick ones in the next 2 months or something.
Okay. Well, and if Mr. Gates and the law department want to work on that and bring those in front of us in the next month or whenever they're ready, we can put that on our agenda to update everyone about what the plan is there.
Okay.
All right.
May I just thank you for having me. I don't want to convey the message that we are trying to get the maximum penalty for everyone all the time. That's really not what our office is about. But we are excited mostly about the bail condition enforcement, about keeping people safe when someone's out on pretrial release. That's really something that we do feel passionately about.
There was definitely some public frustration about people who had committed crimes that were back out on the street. The revolving door syndrome or whatever they were calling it. So I think there'll be a certain segment out there who will be extremely pleased if there's some changes made, I would imagine. So, anything else on that subject? If not, how about old business? Anyone have anything we discussed previous months that they might bring back up again? Mr. Constant?
It's an old business, it's new business, but it's not yet introduced. I just wanted to brief folks that I've been working with some members of the fire department. I don't know if you've been notified, Chief. I probably should have sent an email if I didn't. On creating an amendment to the code that would restrict the purchase of burnt copper wire at metal recycling locations with the intent to stop people from stealing from construction sites and then burning the wire to get the metal to sell. Because our police and fire are the ones who have to go in and secure the scene and are breathing in this toxic air. And it's creating a harmful environment. And so it may end up being introduced by Friday. Maybe the next meeting, it just depends on when it gets finally drafted. But stay tuned for that to be introduced and have a conversation around how we would implement that. So.
Well, and plus if they're out camping out somewhere in the woods and they're trying to burn this stuff off the wire, we could end up with a gigantic fire somewhere that could be difficult to get out depending on the wind conditions.
What AFD members are telling me is they're getting smart because it's so toxic that even they don't want to be around it. So they're lighting it on fire and leaving, and then letting it do its toxic thing, and then coming back and harvesting the metal to resell. And so even they know it's not good to be around. Although a year and a half ago I had dinner at Firehouse 12, and they were telling me that they've been having to deal with this in the woods a lot. And so I know that this is not just a new thing, it's been going on for some time. And it's a pretty straightforward change to the code that can make a difference.
So I haven't been following the price of copper. Is the price of copper up this year? Is that why they're targeting or stealing it more, or?
This has gone on for decades. Yeah, this is not a new problem. It is, we just need to be more assertive of how we deal with it. But yeah, this is a decades-old problem that we just haven't resolved.
Highlighted on The Wire.
Yeah.
What's that?
Highlighted on the TV show The Wire.
On The Wire.
Yeah, I have friends who work in the electrical industries, and they have taken to spray painting their copper transfer stations metal, like flat metal looking, because they just get harvested so often.
Wow.
And so construction sites will tell you this is a massive loss for them, massive, that the costs of the economy are so substantial that there are ways we could approach it with the rhetoric of the economy, but I think the public safety aspect is the crystal clear way to do this, that people are breathing in poison because of this marketing industry. We have the tools to stop it.
I have an uncle who was an electrical contractor, and he would wait for the price of copper to go down, and he'd buy a gigantic, huge supply of it, because some of the large jobs he had, he needed miles and miles of this stuff. And he eventually had to build a, more, it seemed like he was keeping his wire in a prison, because he had so much security and cameras and double locks and all sorts of things on it, because people, he originally had set up on the outskirts of Phoenix with his, with his business, and as the city grew up around him, all of a sudden he had 6 acres in the middle of downtown Phoenix with all this wire and all these tools, and so security got to be quite a challenge in that situation. Anyway, any other questions or comments before we go to audience participation?
One last one. I'm
Okay,
sorry to
Mr.
dominate.
Foster.
I just want to tell you and your staff that this has been a really brutal week, and the green belts and the scenarios the public are talking about are really heavy and awful. And I just want to send my thoughts to your team for the hard work that they're having to face, the reality of our current community.
Thanks.
Ms. LaFont?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for Chief Hetrick, actually, other chief this time. Just about fire danger in the mold. Where are we at? Are you seeing any?
So we're actually in, I would knock on wood if there was like some real wood here somewhere. The current weather conditions actually put us in pretty good shape because the humidity is high. We have been very successful with the rollout of our current FireWise program. We had over 100 people in the Rabbit Creek hillside area who've signed up for FireWise assessments. We're about 50% of the way through those already this year. So the community is really engaged in making improvements to their personal property where they can. But saving grace is our weather. And I know lots of people complained we're not having a summer this year, it's cold, lots of cloud cover. But that helps us. That definitely keeps when the humidity's up, even if there is an unattended fire or somebody burning, copper wire off in the woods, it's less likely to spread. Now that we're at green up and our humidity stays high, so yes, it's great to hope for nicer weather, but on the other side, that will hurt us. So far this year, it's winds. So our fire danger still increases when we have windy conditions, which this has been a windy year. So we're not out of the woods in any way, shape, or form, but our danger is less because the humidity is up.
Well, and I think there's a significant number of black spruce trees out there that have been attacked and in the process of dying and drying out. So we may be in a good situation now, but we're still going to have to stay on top of educating people to get their properties ready to remove some of those trees so that they don't end up starting a larger fire and continue keeping it going. So.
Yeah, this is definitely a long-term effort. This is something we will always have to deal with. And now that the spruce bark beetle infestation has kind of reared its ugly head again, we'll continue to get that messaging out. People, again, the public have just been very responsive and willing to, deal with the issues, and we're there to help however we can. We're also working with the state on some of the corporation-owned or privately owned areas, such as Chugach along for Chugach Electric along the power lines, MEA along the power lines. They're doing mitigation efforts as well, cooperative effort. The state does have some funding that they receive from the federal government to help with that, so we're trying to figure out how to deploy it. Anchorage, because of our past efforts, our danger level is actually less than the Mat-Su. If anybody gets a chance to drive Mat-Su and north on the Parks Highway and out towards Glen Allen, it is worse. It's very similar to what Kenai looked like when we first dealt with this almost 15, 20 years ago. So we're fortunate because we have continued to do good work and maintain our Firewise program, and people have made really good choices with their landscaping. So we're in a little bit better shape because of that. We have to reiterate that is still important that we do that.
May I just add, Mr. Chair, thank you to your team, Chief Hedrick, for your support of the Firewise program, and that was a really good program out of Rabbit Creek, or Golden View Middle School through the Rabbit Creek Community Council. And on the south side, I know there's discussion now about doing an evacuation drill, and so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I guess that looks like that'll do it. It's time for audience participation.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I live in the Mat-Su Valley and follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriate, decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. First, for the note of the record, I was present in the entire meeting of this meeting. Second is I'd like to compliment the chair, Senator Peterson, the way he handled the meeting, particularly on the issue of noting who's recognizing a party to speak, so the tapes here of these meetings clearly identify those people who are speaking. Thank you. I appreciate the effort, and thank you very much. The next thing is, you may not be aware of, but I was at a particular meeting last week, the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission meeting. It was Friday, yeah. I was missing from your meeting on Friday. That's where I was. The chair is Matt Clayman. He was physically present. Also, Supreme Court Justice Joe Bolger was present, physically present, and the Attorney General was part of that commission meeting. Now, what took for note is, as you know, I deal with process and procedures and Open Meetings Act. And the state website noted in that meeting that the meeting wouldn't start till 10:30. Well, the meeting, I saw agenda on the table saying revised for 10 o'clock. I was suspicious that they would try something like that, because normally meetings are 1, 2, or 3 on the hour, not 10:30. So here you had the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission, the Chief Justice as a member, the Attorney General of our state as a member of the commission, contempt of the Open Meetings Act. You can't get any higher in our state. And how do we expect the things to be right? And how do we expect the public, in closing, to other elected officials and government officials to comply with those laws when the Chief Justice of our state and the Attorney General of our state is not complying with it? And thank you very much, and I was brief, and I appreciate being here at this meeting to hear what you all have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And other members of the public?
Al Millspaugh, MILSPAUGH. A couple days ago on Nixle, I read where APD was honored by, I believe it was the Department of Justice, for their work with the other departments, FBI, ATF, etc., for their innovative ways of going against fighting crime and also working with the community. Maybe Chief Dahl can expand a little bit on that. And I just want to say thank you, and we really appreciate it. It isn't just one person, it's a whole department, the administrative, for everybody works the teamwork.
Chief Dahl?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Millspaugh. I've known Al for a long time. I think I know what you're referring to. So I will tell you that my philosophy at APD, and something that myself and the command staff are really pushing hard, is law enforcement is a team sport. And so we work really hard to maintain a relationship with our state and federal partners, and frankly other local law enforcement entities as well, that kind of around Anchorage and all over the state. So so I appreciate the commentary on that. I know that we put a lot of work into those relationships every day, and frankly it makes public safety in Anchorage a whole lot stronger.
Fantastic. Yeah, many hands make light work. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Hondell. I'm a resident of North Star. I live near Chester Creek. I have just two quick sets of questions for Chief Hetrick and AFD. I'm wondering, does AFD keep data on the number of responses to fires on public lands, parklands?
Yes, we do.
And
yes.
how does someone like me request?
You can send me an email. I'll give you my business card before we leave, and we can provide, we'll see to what detail we can provide that, but yes, we can provide quite a bit of that information, especially if you're looking for just response numbers. We, again, can't provide anything that would be EMS related, if it's patient information or things along those lines.
Not detailed, just,
But,
just
yes.
volume numbers.
Yes.
Right, and second question, and so I had called the general AFD number late last summer, I believe, maybe August, and sent emails asking the same question. And so I was a little frustrated because I got zero response at all. And it made me feel like it was being ignored. And I'm just wondering if, letting you know, just anecdotally, and also what sort of monitoring or oversight you have for responses to the published contact info for AFD.
So that is odd, because we are typically very responsive to those kind of requests. So I'm not sure where, I'll have to ask you offline where you sent the notes to. We have had some issues with our generic email address, which is the www.afd@muni.gov or muni.org email address. We've found that sometimes we don't get the messages. Best thing is to call our main number, but we'll have to decide which main number that you call.
Okay, just letting. I mean, I don't need to dig into the weeds on this.
Well,
just letting you know.
I get very concerned when we hear that we weren't responsive, because that's really a key core value for us.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we'll have to figure out what happened.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to participate? All right, and for the members of the committee, if you have ideas or subjects you would like to get on the Public Safety Committee agenda, let Mr. Dunbar or I know, and we'll try to get it on the agenda in time for next month's meeting or the month after that. All right, and with that, I guess we're adjourned at about 12:25.